the program and enjoy him immensely. We welcome now Dr. Claude Anderson.
Thank you very much. And to my colleagues, let me say good afternoon to you and plus the members of the audience. According to John's letter, he indicated to me that he wants me to speak to develop a national plan, and John, that's what I'll try to do for you very quickly. But let me preface that by simply saying that if you hear about reparations, get this very firmly fixed in your mind. You're not here for a parlor discussion. It's not something to talk about that's nice. If you don't get reparations, black folk, you're through in this country. Let me be that very specific for you. You see, what's happening to black Americans is that black Americans have been systematically socially engineered into the lowest level of a real-life monopoly game. You do not own and control a sufficient amount of anything to be competitive in America. And you've been marginalized now for 400 years. You're getting ready to be buried. You can get buried underneath a whole broad groups of ambiguous groupings. That's everything from culture groups, language groups, and gender groups. You're going down. It's no longer an issue. You better get reparations and get it fast. Now, to get reparations, one of the things I've been trying to do now for 30 years, beginning with the state of Florida when Governor Reuben Askew put me over education when they had no blacks in politics in Florida, was to write the first affirmative action plan in the United States, and that was written to be reparations for black folk in 1971. And George Bush Jr., I guess, what's his name, Jed Bush just killed it off about 6 months ago. But what's happening now is that what I'm trying to do is create a Harvest Institute that would try to take all my colleagues here and as much as possible try to give you new points of information to take you outside the box. Part of the problem we got in trying to deal with reparations, a lot of the other racial issues in the country, is that we keep trying to think and find solutions inside the box. There are no solutions inside the box for black folk. You got to get outside and try to find and get a long-term perspective and a long view on it. And that's what the Harvest Institute is in existence for, and that's what they're going to stay in existence for. Now, the reason you cannot win, as I said, is that you've been locked into this low level of a real-life monopoly game. You do not own and control enough of wealth. See, in 1860, for instance, black folk, as a direct result of slavery, had an ownership. When you were 98% slaves, you had an ownership of 0.5% of this nation's wealth in 1860 on the eve of the Civil War. Now, this is the richest country in the world, the most capitalistic country in the world. And here you are 140 years after slavery when you're supposedly 100% free and you still only have 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth. You cannot compete. The typical average white person in America has 3,500 times more money than you have. And that's not true only of blacks in America, it's true of the world internationally. What's happening right now is blacks is a marginalized, subordinated class of people all over the earth. You have 1/2 of 1% of the wealth in this nation. The same thing is true all over the world. In the world, there's approximately $392 trillion worth of wealth on the earth. And black folk around in the world have less than 1% ownership of it. That includes all the African countries. That includes Brazil, Caribbean, and America. You don't own enough control of anything. Whites control almost 100% of all the wealth, power, resources, privileges, and controls of all levels of government. You're playing a game you can't win. You got to get reparations. Now, how are you going to get it? Let me run through 3 or 4 things very quickly because I don't want to take up the time here. First thing you must do, I've heard it mentioned already, we got to commit a national campaign all over this country to start publicizing the issue of reparations for black folk. Not as something nice, but as a necessity, period. That means every living soul, every organization, every institution in this country must begin to start promoting reparations for black folk all over this country. That's level 1, is a massive promotion of reparations for black folk. Second level 2, what we must do at second level 2 now is to start having facts-finding hearings. You must have facts-finding hearings all over this country. And you're going to have facts-finding hearings on at least 2 different levels. One is you're going to go after facts finding about what roles governments have played in the reparations, in the slavery trade against black folk, and the enslavement of black folk, the marginalization of black folk. And that should break down into 2 levels. One is to investigate all levels of domestic governments, that's city, county, federal, and state governments. And the second group would go after the international. So you should have 2 groups of black folk in this country exploring and fact-finding on what roles government have played, one domestically and one internationally. On the left-hand side, you should be doing the same thing for the domestic side. You should be going after the private sector. You should be going after all the private corporations in the United States, what roles they played and how they benefited directly from slavery. And also, on the same side, you must go after all the international corporations and the roles they played and how they benefited. Now, the Harvest Institute right now, my think tank, we've already picked up one. We put out a press release on that. We're going after domestic domestic role that major corporations played in the United States. We've already identified approximately 240 companies that are still in existence that profiteer directly and enrich themselves off of black folk. We're going after that. And what we have to do in our fact finding is be able to factuate, document. There are direct line between how blacks have been crippled all the way up to economically, politically, socially, and educationally, and tied into these major corporations or tied into levels of government. That's your level 2. Level 3, you must then start having a national convention in this country. And right now, I think Dorothy Tillman in Chicago is already, we talked about this. She's going to try to call one in Chicago this coming year. We must have everybody who's playing a role, like Congressman Conyers and everybody from the Congress and Cobra, everybody should be at a national convention where we all come in there to not only energize each other, but to share information, see where we are. They're trying to set it up for this coming February, someplace in the United States, possibly Chicago. That's your 3rd level. The 4th level you should start doing is trying to get into, out of this conference should come strategies and plans and a specific role model. You got to have a model that every black can tie into. A model for reparations. Now, my model's a little different from everyone else's, and that's because I'm outside the box. I'm trying to pull everybody else outside if I can get them. Now, most people are going to try to follow the Jewish reparations model or the Japanese model. I'm following the Indian model. The Indians are the most appropriate model if you want to track down, do anything to get reparations of black folk. Why? Because you see, only American Indians and black folk were spelled out in the Constitution. The Indians on reservations and black folk. There's a direct lineage between those two groups. And if you really want to track and get reparations, the easiest and quickest way is to go find out what happened to American Indians, what benefits they got, and track it. In my new book called Power Numbers, it takes you through every one of those steps. You can follow it. If you pick that up, you can come right to reparations very quickly, because it'll be very difficult for the government to deny black folk for the same thing they're giving the Indians. So when you hear people talking about how bad off Indians are, first thing you say, fine, if Indians that bad off, put us as black folk in the same status with the Indians. We'll take that. Because see, right, what Indians got, see, first of all, nobody declared Indians to be a nation. Indians declared themselves to be a nation. They declared themselves to be a nation all the way up to about 1832 when Supreme Court Justice Marshall said, okay, I'll recognize you as a nation. We never declared ourselves to be a nation. We've always tried to do just the opposite of what the Indians did. Once they became a nation, they drew up a constitution for themselves. We never had a constitution. And what the Indians did with that constitution is then to go to the United States government and say, we do not want to integrate. We did just the opposite. We integrated. And I can track everything right down, or we can follow the Indian model if you want to. And you can see, and all that's already built into the law, and there's a direct lineage between American Indians and black folk that you can follow very easily and get to reparations. But we need to have a model. And in my new book, I get that model to be on the stand in about another month. You get the Powernomics model that'll take you through all those steps of what they did throughout history, from the Blair Amendments and everything else. You can track them very easily, and it'd be very difficult for the United States government to deny you reparations when you only two people that have a constitutional relationship with this government is black folk and Indians. Just like Indians use what they call natural rights and lay a claim against the land, we should use natural law and lay a claim against our labor, misappropriated labor. The next level what you must do is move to a legal step. You need to form at the 4th level, get you a legal body right now, whether it's going to be pro bono or paid. And out of our convention, we should be able to raise some funds to set up a mass legal body that'll be ready to start serving suits based on those facts that you're going to find at the 2nd level. And we start to find those, then we should have people going after suits. One side suing the different levels of government, other side suing the private sector to get reparation funds for black folk. Then at the last level, you can need to set up, at the 6th level, you need to set up some kind of a pool, or resource, or retrieval agency that every time we get some benefits, we're going to a special fund that will be held for pooling and aggregating. Now, then out of that special agency, we break away into 2 groups, what I would recommend. One, you would have an economic development bank on the East Coast and an economic development bank on the West Coast. And what those banks would do is take most of the money you get, not give it to black folk as individuals. You put it into a massive bank where black folk can go draw that money to start low interest, get low interest loans or free monies to build businesses and industries throughout the United States. You also, if you track the Indians, you should try to get yourself some tax-free, tax-exempt land. Just like Indians can go grab any piece of land and federalize and put up a casino, you tell me you ought to do the same thing as a black person, get tax-exempt statuses. We can go on and on. But there's a lot of things we can track. Go after the Indians. But the thing that's most important, I'm going to quit, is that you got to understand that reparations are an absolute necessity. We're going to get buried alive. We do not have enough to be able to compete in this society. And the further we get away from the civil rights movement, the worse things are going to get. And when people start talking about slavery, don't just talk about slavery. Talk about Jim Crow slavery and benign neglect. You got to understand what slavery was. Slavery is the illegitimate child of racism. Racism still exists. That's slavery. Because what racism does, racism keeps and maintains what was created by slavery. Now, racism is a competitive economic struggle between groups of people for power and wealth. And it's slavery, and racism never existed until the 16th century. And when slavery went out of existence, racism took over. Racism has gone from meaning slavery to being something biological. Then it moved on in about the 1800s. It turns to be something as a personal behavior or an attitude, and now bias and a prejudice. Racism has nothing to do with attitudes, with prejudice, and with bias. Racism is a competitive group contest between people for race, resources, and for superiority. And racism is a race without a finish line. I thank you very much.
Welcome back to WMPM Radio Talk Show. What's going on? I am joined with my co-host, the dynamic Katrina Atkinson. We have Ramzu Yunus on the line, and we have Anthony Lee here in the studio with us today, and we're going to be discussing the ballot or the bullet for reparations. Brothers, can you hear me?
I'm here.
Anthony Lee. What's going on, brother?
Oh, I'm here, girl. I'm here. Been here since, 28 years.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so let's get into it because, like I said, the show is only an hour. I wish I had 2 hours. But anyway, so we're going to discuss Malcolm X, the ballot and the bullet first. And Malcolm X made this speech in the 1960s. And in his speech, what struck me the most was that he said, we as black people suffer political oppression, economic exploitation, and social degradation. All of them are at the hearts and mind of the United States government here. Whether it be from the federal, the state, or the local governments, these governments have in place a system and constructors in place designed to keep us locked down as a black nation. Now, the Constitution, in my opinion, is evil. It's pro-slavery, and therefore it should be abolished. Now, we look at the Constitution, and it starts out with the big words, we, the people of the United States. Who are those people? Now, the Constitution contains no definition section. You can't go there and look up and say, oh, who are they talking about? Because they don't have one. So to understand who the people of the United States are, we have to refer back to the Declaration of Independence, which set forth who the people of the United States are. The people of the United States are the same one people that dissolved their political bands with Great Britain in the Declaration. And as you know, the Declaration of Independence said that all men are created equal, but at that time, no state was outlawing slavery, and the Declaration itself contained no such provisions. So there is no federal guarantee of slavery. There is no express limit on Congress banning or limiting it. Of course, the provision regarding the Western territories says that Congress has power to legislate however it wants with regard to the Western territories. Now, Brother Ramzu, listen, can you clear all that up for me?
Which part are you talking about?
I'm talking about the part where the Constitution says we the people.
Of course, the document was formed when we were not considered a people, so the people that they were talking about are the white settlers.
Oh, so we're not basically in the Constitution, but we are as those people.
When they were talking about property in the Constitution, they were talking about us, so we are in this, but not as the people.
Okay, so what's the Constitution good for black people if it's not saying that we are a part of the people? What good is the Constitution to us as black people?
I mean, the Constitution is a good document if we were included with being part of the people, but we're not included in that. So it is no good for us. Constitutions by nature and by principle, they are good because they are meant to define the parameters of action within a nation, what's legal, what's lawful, and also to keep government officials in check. So ultimately, a Constitution is good, but that Constitution of the United States of America did not have black people in mind.
Okay, so now, when I went back and I was studying the 13th Amendment, and it's like, it's two constitutions. You know, if people don't know it, there are two constitutions. And in the second constitution, that's where you're going to find the 13th Amendment. But in the first constitution, there is no 13th Amendment. So how are they amending something that's not there? Are they fooling us? Are they playing with us?
We can see if they're playing with us or not through our condition. Evidently, it has been a game all of these years.
Okay, Brother Lee, you got anything to say about that?
I was listening to a lot of things that basically I can remember. Dr. Claude Anderson and I have a connection as far as statehood in a sense. I grew up in Pensacola Beach, Florida. I've been listening to this man over 40 years. The things he has talked about, most people look at it as a hearsay and don't believe. In this day and time, you can believe what you can believe. And you better believe what he was saying 20 years ago. 20 years ago or more. We need to hurry up and get on board before, like he said, that ship sinks.
Or fails.
You know, I'm an older man now. Thank God I made it through the 64 going on 65 years. So I have seen what has happened over the years. And I see what's happening now. Now, I'm not depressed about it because I believe that we're going to be all right. But it's going to be a struggle.
Yes.
It's going to be a continuous struggle. I retired out of the field of working with the federal inmates. I've seen enough things to let me know that there is an outlet, but are you going to reach for that outlet? Or are you going to just stay in place?
Well, it seems like we've been in place for a minute now, for a couple of centuries. But Brother Ramzu, let me say this to you, and then I want you to tell me your thoughts on this. And Malcolm X, of course, said this as well. He said, when the government of South Africa became too trampled upon the human rights of people of South Africa, they went to the United Nations. When the government of Portugal began to trample upon the rights of our brothers and sisters in Angola, it was taken to the UN. Why even the white man took the Hungarian question to the UN Chief Justice, and they were over there crying about 3 million Jews about their human rights, charging Russia with violating the UN Charter because of its mistreatment of the human rights of Jews in Russia. Now you tell me, how can the plight of everybody on this earth reach the halls of the United Nations, and you have 42 million black people right here in America whose churches were being bombed, whose little girls were being murdered, whose leaders were being shot down in broad daylight? Now tell me why the leaders of this struggle have not taken it before the United Nations.
Well, the leaders of the struggle have taken it to the United Nations. But the United Nations is not going to do anything. The United Nations is a consensus body that agrees on what is right and what is wrong. And they have agreed that black people have been violated and are continuously under human rights violations. We're in a humanitarian crisis. Now, once the United Nations points those things out, it's up to member nations, the member states of the United Nations to implement some form of action or assert some action to stop that violation. And if they don't engage in any actions to stop those violations or to remedy the situation that was caused by the violation, then it's on those who are being violated, who have suffered the violation, it's up to them to do something about it. You know, if you look at what the nations, those different nations took to United Nations, it wasn't just them going to United Nations. They also engaged in struggle within, some of them, many of them armed struggle within their own country. But they pointed out that at the United Nations level, it was justified.
Oh.
Just like now we're in a reparation struggle. Well, let me point out one thing. Everybody that's listening can look this up. There's something at the United Nations level that all nations have signed on to. It's a resolution adopted at the General Assembly called the Declaration on the Right and Responsibility of Individuals, Groups, and Organs of Society to Promote and Protect Universally Recognized Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. That means we have not only the right, but we have a responsibility ourselves to stop those violations. Of course, the first responsibility is on the nation to make sure they don't violate rights or the citizens' rights are protected. But if that nation becomes a violator of rights, then it's up to the next responsibility is on other nations to put them in check at the UN level, which Malcolm was talking about. But if the UN doesn't do anything, which most of the time they don't, then the people that are violated have a right. No, not just a right. They have a responsibility to do something about it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so trying to get others to solve our problems, and definitely the government is not going to solve it. They are the cause of it, the creator of the problem. But going to United Nations, that's not going to do anything. When we engage in some actions, then now we have put the ball in the people's hands who's guaranteed to shoot it. And that's us. So we have the responsibility to do something ourselves. I was listening to Dr. Claude Anderson. He's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Like my top three, I say, of modern day advocates for black people.
I agree.
But everything that we do as a people, leadership, is in the context of what I call demoralization. What's called demoralization. First of all, the leadership is demoralized and people are demoralized. Leadership demoralized because demoralization, first of all, is when a people just lose enthusiasm. They don't want to do anything. They've been demoralized. It was Adolf Hitler who said, he suggested as a war tactic, he said, demoralize the enemy from within by surprise, terror, sabotage, assassination. That is the war of the future. So now leadership, they watch the other leaders of the 60s, 50s, 60s, etc. get assassinated. They watch organizations get sabotaged. So now the new leadership, they don't want to be part of that. They don't want to bite that bullet. So now everything they do is going to be safe. We make sure we're going to do something safe, that the enemy doesn't feel threatened when he will assassinate us like he did Dr. King, like he did Malcolm X, like he did Fred Hampton, like he did so many other incarcerated them. Nobody wants to face that. So they're demoralized from doing something that's real to guarantee us that justice. If you look throughout history, no justice have came without putting your life on the line, without putting your freedom on the line. But now our leadership are so demoralized that they don't want to put anything on the line. They want to go a safe route. But going a safe route, you don't get anything. History has shown us that.
Yes, it has.
Okay, so now you got leadership that's demoralized. And now the population, the regular people, they're demoralized because they know leadership hasn't done anything, so they don't even want to participate in anything. And I agree with that. Why would I participate in stuff that you're doing that's not going to get any results? Dr. Claude Anderson, he's been doing it for 30 years.
Sure has.
The reparations movement going on for decades and nothing has been achieved. Our struggles for justice have been going on for hundreds of years. Nothing has been achieved. So now nobody wants to participate. The leadership don't want to take the risk. So how are we going to get reparations? If Conyers went almost 40 years, year after year, for them to discuss the topic, that means they don't want to hear about it. They're not going to give it to them. Dr. Claude Anderson also mentioned control. He said we don't have control. Well, name a situation where somebody's in control but they want to give up their control. Especially when you're talking about white people. So because you ask them for some control, You're furthering their control because you saying they control the mechanism to put you in control, give you some control.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't control the mechanism of control to give us control. We control that because it's our right. Dr. King said one thing in his last meeting one of his last strategy meetings with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He had a meeting in 1967 in Frogmore, South Carolina. Months before they killed him, Dr. King, because he was engaged in, or they were organizing for what's called the Poor People's Campaign, the reparations campaign, actually. He was going to Washington, D.C. with at least hundreds of thousands, but of course he wished it may have been millions. But he didn't even get to participate because they assassinated him before the campaign. But the campaign was supposed to be a campaign for reparations. He said we're going to exercise civil disobedience until they cut that check. He didn't say we're going to go up there and beg and campaign and point out the wrongs that they have been done. We already know the wrongs that have been done. We ain't got to study that. Dr. King said in that meeting we have moved from the era of civil rights to the era of human rights. Mm-hmm. Why? Like Malcolm X pointed out, civil rights, you're under their jurisdiction. You're in his court asking him to do right by you. Human rights says, nah, you deserve reparations. They don't give you reparations. Take your reparations. Mm-hmm. That's what human rights says. That's what Dr. King was engaging in. In that same meeting in Frogmore, South Carolina in 1967, he said we were seeking to reform certain conditions in the house of our nation because the nation wasn't living up to the very rules of the house that it has described in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Then after Selma and the Voting Rights Bill, we moved into a new era, which must be an era of revolution. I think we must see the great distinction between a reform movement and a revolutionary movement. See, King admitted he had been part of a reform movement for 12 years. Mm. And that's the kind of movement that we're still engaged in, trying to better this government. Like Clark Anderson, most of his suggestions were trying to reform this thing. One thing that Dr. Clark Anderson mentioned was revolutionary. And that's becoming a nation and having your own control. How do you become a nation and have your own control? When you go to those people who have a right to form their nation, like he said, and said, look, do you all want to be a nation? Do you all want independence from the United States? If the people vote yes, then you can take control of wherever you live and give yourself reparations. Further, because we don't even know the definition of reparations, first of all. We think reparations is a check. But the main part of reparations is the repair or restitution of a people back into the condition that they were in before the violation. Mm-hmm. There's another document that those who are listening, you should download this document because the discussion on reparations has been one erroneous. It's misleading. There's a document at the United Nations level called the Basic Principles and Guidelines on the Right to Remedy and Reparations for Victims of Gross Violations of International Human Rights Law and Serious Violations of International Humanitarian Law. So we need to read this so we can understand what reparations really is. And then we will see why white folks the government really doesn't want to give us reparations because they will have to give us some control. They will have to put us back in the state of being that we were in before they violated, and that's our own self-government. It's something called the right of self-determination, which is the most powerful right that exists, collective right. So first of all, in order to be repaired, let us govern ourselves. Let us be independent. But you got to let us be independent. All we have to do is have our own vote where we live and say, look, we declare our independence. We declare our nationhood, like Dr. Claude Anderson mentioned. And now that we are a nation, we control where we live. Do you know that where black people live is worth over $15 trillion in real estate value alone? Well, that's enough monetary value to give us some monetary compensation, which we have been erroneously thinking is reparation. So now we have solved that problem with our own hands instead of begging them decade after decade after decade after decade to even discuss reparations. Do you want to keep on waiting for those reparations? That's why the youth don't want to participate, because they're tired of us begging and getting no results. Let's engage in some actions that's going to guarantee us reparations because it's in our hands to make sure that happens. Don't let me keep on
No, brother, you
Something
good.
to say, go ahead and interject.
You good, brother. You good. I did want to ask Mr. Lee, did he have any follow-ups on that before we go on to our next discussion?
Yeah, because my thing is this. The young people of today is like it was when we were young. We had a set goal that we wanted to get involved in, and we didn't want to go the same way that the seniors was going. Not to demeanor them, but we wanted to do something totally different. That's why the Black Panther came about. That's why now you have the Black Lives Matter. Black lives really matter now. More so to the degree that people are not understanding exactly what Black lives meant when they say Black Lives Matter. I'm at a point now in my life where I'm with the youth. You know, I'm with the fight that they're doing. I'm with the way that they're going about because I did it that way. And I still have a youth in me to a degree. But I want to see that and acknowledge that and accept that because you can't keep doing the same thing, expecting the same result. You know what that means. You're crazy as a bad bug.
That's right.
So the results you're going to get today is going to be different than the results you got of yesterday.
Okay. I agree. I
right.
agree with that. So the next thing that I wanted to discuss was nationalism. And that's something that we have never tried, was nationalism. We have had individual groups that have stepped out on their own national endeavors, but as a group of people, we have never practiced nationalism. Like I think it was Malcolm that said we went into slavery together and we must come out of slavery together. So nationalism, brother, Malcolm X says that the whole church structure in this country is white nationalism. Billy Graham, and I know Billy Graham preached white nationalism, and if you go inside a white church, they are preaching white nationalism. They got white Jesus, white Mary, white God, everybody white. That's called white nationalism. So Michael said that any kind of act that's designed to delay or deprive us of getting our full rights, that's the government that's responsible, not any and everybody. That's particularly the government responsible. So, brother, if you could you touch on nationalism for me?
I love nationalism. I love white nationalism.
I do too.
I love black nationalism. Black nationalism is natural. Every group should want to celebrate its own culture and have its own strong territory, government, whatever defines a nation and makes a nation strong. Every group should want that. So there's nothing wrong with nationalism. The Bible, the religion encourages nationalism. Throughout the Old Testament, you saw Hebrew nationalism. They want their own nation. They want their own government. They don't want to be oppressed by others. So that's a good thing. We just have to adopt nationalism ourselves as black people. And part of being a nationalist means you want your own nation for your kind, your people. You don't want to be integrated into another person, especially when you are a minority. You are a very small percentage of that population. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody that thinks sane, that's right thinking. There's something in political science called tyranny of the majority. Tyranny of the majority is it's defined as an inherent error or weakness in democracy because the majority rules. And since the majority rules, it's always going to get what it wants over the interest of the minority. So it's akin to oppression and tyranny. So we're always going to suffer that. So that's why every group should want its own nation, because they are the majority and they will get what's in the interest of the majority, or which will be the whole, because it's only them. So nationalism is a good thing. We just got to adopt nationalism and want our own nation.
I agree. And black nationalism is a self-help philosophy. So the political philosophy of black nationalism only means that we have to carry out our own political program of re-education. And we really need to be re-educated when it comes to of the ballot or the bully. You know, so if we're not voting as a block, and this is just an example, if we're going to go to the polls and we're not voting as a block, then from my understanding, we're not making much movement, for the simple reason is because of the Constitution back again, we're only 3/5. So it takes 3 black people to make 1 vote. That's my opinion. So if we don't have nationalism and we don't have a way forward to nationalism, what is the best route that you could see for us right now?
The best route is nationalism. There's no alternative. I would never give an alternative route for my daughter to be raped in an alternative way. I don't want her to be raped at all. So there's no alternative for us. It's either or. Either we die or we become a nation. Either or.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
And we will never have a big enough block because we are not a large enough population. So we have to choose to be our own nation. It's simple as, just like we're having a vote next year, if they're having an election next year, we can have our own vote for independence. That's what the leadership should be organized behind. We should have ballots in every city asking black people, do they vote for black independence?
Exactly.
If they say yes, the majority says yes, then we take over where we live. We make sure we got a governing body or council in these areas, and we just take over and start governing ourselves. Put our own police force out there if we want to keep complaining about police brutality. We take over the police force. But overall, just take over the government, period. That's why King said reform or revolution. We must see the great distinction between a reform movement and a revolutionary movement. He said he was turning into he became a revolutionary. They killed a revolutionary. But they feed us in history a reformist king. So now everybody want to be like Dr. King. They're trying to reform this thing, forgetting that during King's last months, he became a revolutionary. He abandoned trying to reform this thing.
So, brother, when you were
revolution or nothing else, go ahead.
That's exactly right. I agree with you 100%. But a couple years ago, you were in Detroit and you did the Black Independence, and that was a big turnout. So, can you tell us about what Detroit meant when you were in Detroit? What was the meaning behind you being there with that program?
Yeah, we were voting for independence, rallied the people in Detroit to vote for independence. When the mobilization was witnessed by the federal government, it wasn't the local Detroit government, they stepped in and cracked down with violent repression of that movement.
Yeah, I saw that. I followed that.
Because of that violent repression, they give us a lawful right to engage in a liberation struggle against them. And that's why I am where I am now.
You're in Russia today, right?
I'm in Russia.
Okay, I saw a little bit about what was going on with you there in Russia, and I know when you was in Venezuela as well, it was the same type of movement. But for me, this movement that you're there in Russia now it kind of stands out a little. Could you tell the public what's going on with the Russian front there?
Okay, first of all, everyone, we're shocked that a black man is in Russia or an so-called American is in Russia. Yeah. Look at your history and know that Russia did not enslave black people like America did, the government that you participate in and vote for. Russia did not colonize the whole world like the government that you participate and vote for and support in America. Actually, Russia assisted different African nations against America and other colonizers, slavers, and conquerors. Also, Russia served as a refuge for some of our leaders during the Black Power or Civil Rights struggle as well. So Russia has always been an ally of black people. Of course, to us, by way of propaganda, Russia has been an ugly, mean, angry bear. That's what I looked at Russia as growing up because of the propaganda.
That's
but
right.
Russia has always been an ally of black people. Also, the principle that America practices itself And that principle is my enemy's enemy is my friend. If a big bad bully has been abusing me, beating me up on the playground, taking my lunch money, and another person as big as that bully comes up, wants to fight that bully, that's my friend. And so because of what we have been doing in America, we need allies. But America's going to be resistant. It's going to resist our independence. It's like they resisted the independence of Vietnam. Vietnam had to whoop them and kill our innocent fathers and uncles and grandfathers because America sent them over there to fight against those people's independence. America's always been against the independence of our people, Asian, Black, South America, whatever. So because of that resistance that they have against our human right of self-determination, then we have to get some strong allies. And so we're here allying with our historical proven friend, and that's Russia. So that's why I'm in Russia, and we've got certain things going on. We are also dealing in petroleum. That petroleum is meant to help finance and fund our independence, help boost the independent economy for Black people in America.
I know I read
strategizing and working together. Go ahead.
I know I read somewhere where Russia was giving $300 billion towards the African American independence here in the United States. Can you go into that any?
Yeah, I'll go a little into that. It's
Okay.
an alliance, a Russian Afro-descendant alliance, and the alliance has been granted the permission or availed the ability to trade in Russian petroleum and petroleum products, and the revenue from that, or some of it, of course, the state has to survive to keep producing, meaning Russia. So that revenue, 300 billion, even plus, above 300 billion, will go towards our independence.
Brother, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me, brother?
I can hear you.
Okay. Now, make a distinction for me, because you got people who are listening and they're going to go a different way. Like you just said, a black man, American man in Russia. Make the distinction from Russia and Putin.
Okay, Russia and Putin. Of course, this used to be the Soviet Union before it was broken up in the 90s. And now the main country of the Soviet Union was Russia. As Russia was breaking up under the influence of America, because they wanted Russia to break up, 'cause that's what weakens a country, if you break it up into pieces. And so during that time, the country was was breaking up and trying to adopt new economic measures, because America wants to force the world into a capitalist model, and they was trying to adopt that model. And during that time, Russia actually went into chaos for some years. And Putin was elevated, went through the ranks, and became prime minister, then president. And Putin actually saved the day because they were in turmoil. So they looked at him as a savior. That's why he has like a 90-something% approval rating in Russia. They like him. So Russia is the country. Of course, Putin is the leader of the country, and Putin has been doing what he tried his best and what he knows to try to reconstruct a great power. That reconstruct doesn't mean taking over other territories. It means reconstruct the economy, a booming economy and industrial base. So he's their champion. They like Putin.
Well,
the war in Ukraine is, if you look back throughout the past at least 15 years or so, you will see that America, first of all, the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was formed by United States and Great Britain.
right.
They formed that to team up against Russia,
That's
against
right.
the Soviet Union. So, okay, we're going to defend ourselves if the Soviet Union attacks, because the Soviet Union is powerful. So we're going to defend ourselves. But then they kept expanding and recruiting other nations into that organization. But when the Soviet Union had dissolved, then America had agreements with the Soviet Union leadership to, okay, you no longer fear us anymore, so stop expanding. We're not expanding. Matter of fact, we've broken up. So stop expanding and don't come near us on our borders with your weapons.
Right.
America said, okay. But of course they kept expanding. And even as late as 2008, Putin warned them, said, look, you're right on our tail now. You recruit nations into NATO, it's right on our border. And then the last straw when they courted Ukraine. They helped throw a coup, they created a coup in Ukraine against the leadership of Ukraine, which was pro-Russian. It was Ukrainian leadership, but they were pro-Russian. America don't want people to be friends with Russia because they want them to become part of their team. So they had him overthrown. And they put the guy in who's there now. If you look at his history, this guy's a comedian, he's an actor, he cross-dresses and stuff. So they put him in place, and then they tried to recruit him into NATO, putting military bases, etc., in the region. And that's what Putin said, look, I've been warned y'all since at least 2008. I'm going in. And he came in and said, look, we're going to stop it. Not to take over the country, but to stop the expansion and put military bases, just like America's getting ready to blow Cuba off the map because they had Russian military weaponry in Cuba. Too close for comfort.
That's right. They bullies. They are bullies, straight up bullies. And if they bully us right here in the house where we at, imagine what they're doing out there bullying other countries.
And the only people that can check them is strong enough is Russia or China. So they want to contain those nations because historically that's who have checked them. That's who checked. If it wasn't for China and Russia, Africa would probably still be colonized. Because China and Russia stepped in and helped give weapons to those freedom fighters.
Right.
And they wanted to go, in the past 20 years, they wanted to invade other countries, like Zimbabwe, which Russia at the Security Council level who stopped them from that, and China who stopped them from those actions. So they don't want anybody with the strength and power to be able to stop them from their world domination. And Putin promotes multipolarism, a multipolar world, meaning everybody has power, not unipolar world, but just the United States has power, and everybody else is so weak that they follow the dictates of the United States government. So it's not about wanting to expand and have an empire in this region of the world. He just wants to be multipolar and not have one nation dominating everything and dictating how people run their society and their economy. You see how they holding a stick against Africa just to make them accept homosexual marriage and all this kind of stuff. Exactly.
And withholding this and withholding that until they decide they're going to let men sleep together and all this kind of craziness. But I really admire, I think it's the president of Uganda, when he said that it won't happen. It's not happening. You keep your culture over there, and this is our culture over here, and we're not bending. No matter how many times you, whatever it is, they withhold this and withhold that. But I think black people in America think that they are free, and what they don't understand is that you have never claimed your independence from your colonizer or from your slaveholder. We have never, ever claimed our independence. And when we look at other parts of the earth, and we find, other, black and brown, red and yellow people, even in Africa and Asia, claim their independence. They didn't get it through singing, "We Shall Overcome." They didn't get it, they got it through nationalism. And it is nationalism that brought about the independence of most all country people
of the
United States. Even them, they fought for their independence from Britain. So how they feel like we can't fight for our independence from them? Help me make it make sense.
They never said we couldn't. They just made sure that they influenced leadership not to go that route. But it's up to us. They have it on their own books, meaning their law. And look, if you don't like the way you've been treated, black people, you have what's called the right of self-determination. You can have your own vote for independence and declare your independence. It's just up to us to organize that, and that's what we have been doing in Detroit. and now also Jackson, Mississippi. But we should do that all over America. That's the rallying we should do. Dr. Claude Anderson was right. We should rally the people around all over America, but not rally them to try to pressure the government. That's reformers. Rally them to declare their independence. And then that will be our reparations.
Exactly. And I so believe that. So, I'm on the campaign for our independence. I'm definitely on the campaign wagon. So I'm asking every black Native person out there, because you are a native of these lands and they are not. So I'm definitely rallying, the nation to seek independence.
Indeed, that's a great job. I would like to encourage everybody also. We have, like we say, independence is reparations. There's no reparations without us being independent.
Exactly.
So we have what's called reparations app, where you can cast your vote by registering on the app. You're casting your vote, and also registering a reparations account where we can control our own economy. That's where, through that app, that's how the economic benefit from things such as that 300 billion plus of revenue from Russian petroleum will be dispensed.
Okay, brother, you never told us the app. What's the name of it?
Reparations.app. Reparations.app.
Reparations is spelled out, right?
Yeah. Reparations.app. I hope I spelled that right.
Okay. Reparations app, everybody. Go to that app and cast your vote for black independence, so we can, get this show on the road. At the
same time, you have that's a digital wallet. At the same time, you have a wallet with your reparations in it. And when you sign up, you'll see $100,000 U.S. dollar value. That's not there until we declare our independence.
Oh.
So now we have the resources to leverage in order to be able to transact.
Okay.
It's a long story behind that. Not a long explanation, but it's more than the 5 minutes we have left.
Right.
So you can read the website, read what's going on. We have an 800 number that you can call. And
can you put that number out there?
Information.
Put the number out there, brother.
It's 888-999-6530. 888-999-6530. Call that, and the Human Rights Policy Officer will answer the phone and give you the information that you seek.
Awesome. Well, brother, when you get back this way, I'm sure we're going to meet up and go over some things, and let's try to get this reparations and independence, started for our nation. I know, but you've been started years ago. But it's time for it to expand to the different, states, like North Carolina for one of them, which was a huge whole slave state. So we're going to have to get together on that. Brother, Mr. Lee, do you have any last words?
Well, I'm not going to jump the gun, but
Okay.
To the listeners, I'm going to let Mr. Johnson, speak to you at a given time.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
I'm not going to jump the gun,
Don't jump.
but get ready for an
know.
announcement.
Yeah, I know, right? As black people, we have always cut our or burnt our bridges just when we needed them. And for every nationality or people need to be able to communicate one to another. And the radio stations, is one of the biggest ways of communication, to our people. So when we burn our bridges and things like that, and, we always fall short. That's all I can say. We always fall short when it comes to, nation building, and which is something that we need to really start doing very seriously and taking it very seriously, and that's nation building. We are starting now with communities. We are starting our first black community. When I say community, I'm not talking about neighborhood just with a few houses. Just with houses, I'm talking about stores, shopping centers, businesses. That's what's going to help us, along the way, that we have to start making these preparations, and start building our own communities. putting our own stories in them. Even if we have to go to the extreme of saying, you know, we're not going to shop there anymore. We're going to let my brother open this store up, the same store this man here got, but we're going to shop with my brother.
And not cutting you off, but don't forget, we've done this before.
Yeah, we've done it before.
This is nothing new.
I know.
We've done this before.
I know. And we need to do it again and not listen to the Sambos that come into our communities, you know, passing off, you know, white liberals, you know, as my friend. You know what I'm saying? So we definitely need to cut that out. Well, I'm going to have to get up out of here, brother. You got a few more minutes you can say what it is you need to say, and we're going to get out of here.
Yeah, I appreciate you for having me on this show. I appreciate everybody for listening. I hope what we spoke on resonated with the people. It's time that we all get in tune together. You know, not to sing, as you said earlier, but in tune to take the right action. So I pray that what I spoke on resonated with everyone. Appreciate everybody for listening. Let's move forward with love of each other. And if we love each other enough, then we will be willing to do what it takes to protect and further along the existence of what we love. All right, everybody. Peace. Love you all.
Love you too.